Welcome to Disruption Now and our special episode of The Breakdown. As always, I want to invite you to like us on YouTube. If you're listening to us via podcast, whether it be on Google Play, whether it be on Apple, Stitcher, whatever you listen to, whatever the method of listening to us is, I invite you to also write a review. That helps people learn about us, and it helps more people be exposed to our podcast. But for now, I want you to join our podcast. I'm Rob Richardson. I'm your moderator.
And I'm James Keys. I'm Tunde Ogunlana.
And I'm Carlton Washington.
Well, any of us would do anything for our kids, and you want to make sure your kids are successful. You want to get them into college. So it's no wonder that parents do everything they can. They provide the best resources. You get the best tutors. Nothing wrong with that. But, you can sometimes take that a little bit overboard, and that's what's happened recently. If you've been following the news, you know that there's a massive college scandal involving multiple colleges, involving multiple parents, and involving, get this, $25 million. One person, a middleman, was paid $25 million to help kids get into college. This wasn't an ordinary, normal college scheme or anything normal to get your kids in, because there actually are legal ways to kind of get your kids access. But no, for some reason, they had to go and take a few steps here. Not only did they cheat on the tests, they also made up disabilities to get more time. They had people take the tests that actually weren't the person. They made fake profiles of the people. They had people cheat on the tests. They went through all types of levels of access. They paid administrators. They paid coaches. And they didn't stop there. What's unique is we're used to hearing scandals with college students, particularly it usually has something to do with recruiting of college athletes. So that's not anything that would surprise anybody. But what you usually don't hear is pretending to be a college athlete and then not even playing a sport. That's what these parents did. You had one set of parents that paid nearly $500,000 to get their kid into a school. I really don't understand this, but this is what happens when you have privilege, when you have wealth, and your connections just get you to believing that you can do whatever you want. The rules don't matter. You don't even have to play the game anymore when you have enough money. At least that's what they thought. Problem is they got caught. And now the FBI has a case against multiple parents, and multiple people will likely be going to jail. So this is where we find ourselves dealing with privilege in a situation where you let your privilege get in the way of common sense. So much so, this is stupid. I don't even understand this, but I actually want to hear from you guys about this. What's your personal perspective? Do you consider this to be privilege? I mean, what do you actually make of this story?
I would like to, I'd be surprised if this wasn't James's response, but I'm not going to speak for him. The first thing that came to my mind about this is what's so surprising about this is this is to be expected. Nepotism and other benefits when it comes to college entry have always been around. Favoritism, like you said, legal ways. I'm sure you're talking about donations to the schools and all these other different workarounds to get into school are available. So I don't see why it's so surprising. I'm really kind of concerned that the FBI is spending their time and resources investigating this type of thing when there's so much other more serious crimes going on. I completely agree with you that it's stupid because let me tell you something. College education these days is extremely overrated most of the times unless you're going into certain professions. So why pay for that? Why not start your kid a business? But at the same time, I also think that the parents should be immune from any type of repercussion from this because, like you said, as a parent, we do anything for our kids. And so it's not their fault. I mean, we're just doing whatever parents, we would just do whatever it takes to get our kids ahead. And so I don't think they should be blamed for that. I don't think Becky should go to jail. And now
you don't think Becky should go to jail, huh? You're for Becky. Becky stays.
But the schools now, whatever administrators, coaches, anybody involved with the school who took money for this, that they got to pay. And hey, if FBI wants to waste their time with this, let's just go down the rabbit hole and see how long it's been going on and how many schools have participated so we can all get our freaking money back. All this stuff was going on. Tons of people out there with these degrees will tell you they're hurting student loans and all this type of stuff and missed opportunities. So, let's see where this goes in that direction. Let's shine a light on these fake institutions and fake processes and fake promises and get our money back or get some repercussions on them.
Well, I'll tell you, Carlton did come and steal my thunder. You know, that was the first part of my take for sure is, hey, what's the surprise here? We know this goes on all the time. I'll tell you this, what stood out to me was that these are actually the people who aren't really that privileged. Like the people who really do play this game, they're playing in the million, they get buildings named after them, and then their kids go to the school. Or they're playing in a whole nother league. These guys are trying to skirt it with 10 grand or 20 grand or even 100 grand, and they can't play in that game. And so that's why they're bribing coaches and trying to get some little kid or some teenager to take a test for their kids or something like that. This is like the lowbrow, you know, the guys who wish they had the privilege trying to make it happen for their kids. Now, I do think the parents should have to pay. Now, granted, I'm sensitive to the fact that, yeah, I would do a lot for my kids also, but in the same way that if somebody steals bread to feed their kids, while we understand they still have to pay for that, there's still repercussions for that because we can't just turn it over and say, hey, whatever you do for your kids, it's immunity. So, but yeah, what stood out to me on this is just more so that the game that's being played here is like small potatoes, you know, and the guy who got all the money for it is really just preying on. He's not going to billionaires doing this game. He's going to the people that the wannabes.
Right. No, I think that's true. Tunde, what's your perspective?
Let me jump in here because just to add and not really correct it, but add to it. Some of the people that I saw on the list were very high net worth people. I mean, you had the guy that was a CEO of PIMCO funds, which I think is like $2 trillion in assets under management. So you had some people that were higher net worth. I think it's interesting because I think I'm gonna be the contrarian to both my boys here for the first time on our podcast. And this is an interesting thing because I think we have two different things here. You've got one that's kind of just the ethical thing of being a parent and I guess acting in a way that I think most of us wouldn't want our kids to act, you know, doing something underhand and kind of going around the system. But then you have the other issue. I agree with you, Jimmy, like, you know, I kind of thought in my head, like, what happened in the old school way of just, like you said, donating a couple $100,000 to the medical school or the stadium being built?
That would have got him in.
But the difference, what I realized, because I've been around families like that. Let's just leave it at that. And my point is they make the donation, and it's more the kind of regular old school way of pay to play. Of their kind of kid just gets ahead in the line of admissions, maybe. But the kid was already had the grades and the GPA and all that to kind of be in college. I think what I saw when I was reading about this particular scandal, what struck me was these kids all had like 1.0 GPAs. That's why the parents went through this really kind of twisting themselves in pretzels and doing all this behind the scenes stuff and paying all this money. We're talking about the parents that paid $500,000. There were others that paid over $1 million. And that's because their kids were such bad students and druggies and all that stuff in high school that they had to pay this level of money to get them in. And like you're saying, because
that's such a disservice too to your kids. Isn't it such a disservice to your kid to do that?
I agree. But here's where the loophole really comes through. It's the NCAA side to what you guys talked about, because I played NCAA basketball. And the NCAA, the primary rules are you have to have a 2.0 GPA and a certain score in your SAT, and that's it. There's none of the other stuff where you got to show you did extracurricular. So what they were doing was pretending that these kids were going to go on teams like the rowing team, the archery team, the javelin team, whatever. Obviously, it wasn't basketball, football, the major sports. That it would have been obvious that kid's not at that level. And so I just feel like there's a lot of us, like all of us on this podcast, that came from kind of just normal middle class or upper middle class families that we had to study and work hard. And this is an example that those that have enough means were able to kind of skirt around the system. And then the other thing, to the point about the FBI being involved, this is another area that this was a very unique and actually smart scam until it wasn't smart because they got caught.
Yeah.
The guy had a nonprofit.
I think it wasn't that smart.
And where the FBI gets involved is because of the tax fraud. These donations were made to a nonprofit. So that $500,000, for the example of, I think it was, the last name was Loughlin, the actress from Full House. She took a tax deduction for that kind of contribution.
But here's
so
the
now it's kind of like they're bad.
Right. But it's also stupidity.
That's why the FBI gets involved, because it's tax fraud at the end of the day as well. So it's like a double whammy to the system.
No, I agree. But like James said earlier, though, I actually think had they donated that money directly to the university, unless the kids' grades were absolutely horrible, they still find a way to work with you, because if you give a few $100,000, you know, they'll say, oh, she's got a podcast. We need some diversity. I mean, there's a lot. Look, I've seen admissions. I've seen how it plays out. They're not going to tell you that directly, but I think there's a lack of sophistication with not understanding that how this actually works. You don't have to set up a fake nonprofit. Actually give to the nonprofit, the school. So this is like, this is stupid. Like, this was really, really, really stupid. That's number one. What's that? Go ahead,
I was just going to say, but what about the idea? Because I also think, look, we shouldn't blame the kids. I look at this as, I think this is another example. This might be a little bit kind of off the direct topic, but it's like the idea of people wanting to keep up with the Joneses. I feel like these parents, because they had the means and they were in that kind of, that certain kind of elite society, when you look at the schools that this was done with, it was Yale, USC, Harvard, you know, Wake Forest, schools that
they're good,
are
great schools.
Traditionally kind of the upper class schools. So
yeah,
it's almost like I feel like they were like parents that were like, well, I didn't push my kid and discipline them to study, but I also don't want to be at the dinner party and make it look like my kid's a loser that they didn't get into college.
Which is
so
horrible.
I'm gonna do everything I can behind the scenes to push my kid into college when they didn't earn it.
Right.
So it's almost like the narcissism of the parents now has created this mess.
And they're hurting their kids. Like I look at this and say, you're setting your kids up, making them feel as if they have earned this. They're going to this situation thinking that they have, and they're going to, for the rest of their life, feel like they are better than they actually are. And if you actually want to build character, making sure your kids struggle a little bit, making sure they understand they have to actually earn things in life, they will become better people, build better character. This is not the way you do it. This is horrible parenting. That's what I think.
Yeah, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt the kids big time. And the thing is what happens? So you got them in. What the hell happens once they're in? I mean, school's not easy, man. I mean, then what? You got to pay every year. You got to,
pay every professor.
That's exactly it. That's the setup. Is that it's a crutch that becomes something that you have to keep pulling out for your kid. Some parents are able to do that all the way, take their kid all the way to the top. Like to where the kid inherits all this money. Some parents, they just try to do as much as they can. But the primary disservice, I don't blame the kids, but I also don't make a martyr out of the kids. The disservice here is to society at large. Those are spots that could have went to deserving students.
I think let's actually pick up on that point a little bit, James, while you're on it. Think about, there's only so many spots that are actually available in these elite colleges. And, these students replace others who were way more deserving. If Tunde, you said some of them had a 1.0, I mean, they're not even going to last at the school, but yet they took someone else's place that worked hard. What do we say to, whoever it is in middle America, whoever it was from the hood, say, if you work hard, do everything right, you're going to have every opportunity? That's not true, because you can buy your opportunities.
No, I don't think people really expect that this day and age. People do expect people who have greater means and wealth.
Some people believe the dream.
There are a lot of people that I think maybe conveniently, maybe there's some cognitive dissonance there, but they understand that wealthy people get benefits and breaks that they don't. Privilege is not something that blinds people. People see the privilege that happens in our society. Now, that doesn't mean we should accept it, but it's something that happens. Now, in this case, it comes to light and we handle it. We deal with it. I don't know that there should be surprise, but that doesn't mean I don't think we should accept it. Our society can do better and we should do better. And like I said, I don't have any sympathy here from the standpoint, this was just sloppy. Like, they were doing this in a way, it's like, well, you're not teaching your kid how to overcome adversity. You're not teaching your kid dedication, things like that. You're just trying to put them in there. They're unlikely to succeed. And then they're in that, at least that initial piece. And then they're taking a spot from somebody who's worked very hard and then therefore is going to have to get bumped down. And that's not something that's not proportional to the effort that they put into it.
Yeah. And to piggyback on what Jimmy says, this is what I'm trying to understand. Because, we're always going back and forth on these hot topics, especially like, my favorite person, AOC. And,
that's your girl, man. You love some AOC. You love her.
Today. But my point is like Jimmy said, first of all, what do people think people want to get wealthy and rich for? I mean, it seems like everyone's trying to attack the benefits of what comes along with the American dream. And that American dream really is privileges, access, whatever it is that money can buy. So why is it that people are so surprised? Like, what did you think that you were trying to get rich for, just so you could just, swim around your money like, Scrooge McDuck. I mean, people want to get rich so they can do stuff, so they can have things.
Do you want to give your kids an undeserved benefit, though? I mean, to a level of you want to get them?
No.
Because I wouldn't want to do it. I would help my kids. I would help them in every way I could, teach them to work hard, but I'm not going to give them so much help that I think it disables them to be a strong person, which I think that's what these parents are doing. Exactly.
Boca Raton, Florida, right next to Delray Beach, Florida. And we are known in this community for doing that. And I'll tell you where that leads. It leads to rehab or to death. When you're just messing your kids up doing that, you are hurting the kids, you're hindering the kids. Statistically speaking, those kids never make it or amount to anything but drug addicts usually, or something subpar mediocre. And so, yeah, it's a huge disadvantage to the children. But at the same time, I mean, I don't think the parents are liable, and that benefit, I'm sure they appreciate that benefit being there for their hard work.
Now, why do you think the parents aren't liable? Because it's like, when you go in and you give to a fake nonprofit and you bribe coaches and you bribe admission officers directly, like this was kind of stupid. Like they could have, no, it wasn't kind of stupid. It was really stupid. That's one. But two, I like to talk about the privilege part that you just brought up, Carlton, because, I actually have some issue with privilege too, in terms of, you've been able to get into a school just because you're rich and like nothing else, and you get to take someone else's spot. And this can be done in a legal way. When I think about how much of a big deal affirmative action has been made of, and this makes it look rather silly because I've never seen legally right now, since the beginning of the foundation of this republic, you are able to get into all these Ivy League schools because of what's called legacy admissions, which means that if your parents went there, you can go there. That's what that means. I find that way more offensive than something like, gender equality or even affirmative action, which I think is not perfect. But when you look at something like this, I've never, at least somebody can point it out to me, I've never seen a lawsuit dealing with legacy admissions because the wealthy or the powerful get into a school. I could be wrong, but I've never seen that.
This is one of those topics I think that I just look at it in a very simple way. I don't wait in lines when I go out. When I go out, I go straight to the front door. I take out some cash and I say, hey, I don't want to wait in this line. Here's some cash. Get me in now. Okay, sir, let's go. We're in. That's life, man. And you know what? I work really hard to be able to make that happen. So this is no different than that.
But you earn those benefits. You think your kids should be able to pay and get in line? I mean, that's what I'm.
I don't think the kids.
Go ahead, Tunde.
I don't think the kids earned it, but I do think the parents have, if they work for their money, also have earned the right to ask. And so, I mean, who would have thought that the freaking feds would be involved in this?
Because they were stupid. That's why they got involved. They didn't know how to follow the normal rules. Go ahead, Tunde.
Let me chime in because I think we're talking about kind of two separate things at the same time. Because you're right, Rob, there's the legacy program at the Ivy Leagues. But at the end of the day, I mean, look, I'm sure guys got into school because their parents that maybe not deserved it in the last 100, 150 years of, Yale and Harvard. So I'm not going to sit here and say I know every case. But in general, the idea is that the legacy is really about your kid still qualifies to go to college, meaning they had a 2.8 or a 3.5 or something like that in high school that they showed their competency. I'm with Carlton on that. If I'm wealthy and I made a lot of money, I don't have a problem with paying for my kid to get in the front of the line, but I'm the type of parent that my kid will still have a 3.5 or 4.0 because I'm a pain in the ass dad. And I make sure my kids read, I make sure they do their homework. What the difference with this case was, it seems that this whole scandal was put together specifically for these families who had like jackass kids, that they weren't doing their job at home during the upper,
Or they were bad parents. They could be bad parents that didn't hold their kids accountable. I keep going back to the parents more than the kids.
Bad parents, but because I don't know the family situation, but
call the kids jackasses.
Bad parents, but you're gonna.
I'm just
jackass kids.
Just for the purpose,
like the kids are kids.
No, but I'm just saying this though. There's a lot of wealthy families that I know that they are, strict with their kids with homework and all, and the kids have good grades. I got no problem with them making a donation or doing something.
I completely agree.
Getting to the head of the line. That's life, and I agree with Carlton on that. What I'm saying is, I agree with Rob too, that the sloppy nature of this is what led to the FBI specifically, because this is just what I do. This was tax fraud and tax evasion investigation, because you had a fake nonprofit, and these people, think about it. This guy took $25 million in donations. That $25 million wasn't taxed. So let's just assume they're all high net worth people, and until 2017, the top tax bracket was 39%. So let's just assume 39% of that 25 million would have gone to the IRS and the U.S. Treasury and would have funded our government. I'm not here to argue about taxes. I'm just making the point that's probably why the FBI came in, because this was a tax fraud case.
If I can shift the conversation a little bit, James, you want to say something quickly?
Yeah, I don't think the taxes are what they're after. I think that this stuff, from a societal standpoint, this is wrong. Now, granted, as a parent, I can understand why they did it. And I actually don't believe you guys when you say, well, Tunde didn't say this, but I don't believe you guys when you say that you wouldn't try to push your kid forward, even if they weren't totally deserving of it. Like, I think that I believe it when I see it with that. Like, that's a difficult spot to be in for a parent. You know, you might not have been perfect the whole time. Well, you said that you
my
would
kid gets 1.0 college.
but I mean, those are easy. Basically, my point is those are easy things to say from afar without being in that situation.
No, that's very true. That's true.
I fault the parent, and this is right to go after these parents, but I can still understand why they did it and say, yeah, like that is why people like to make a lot of money, is so that they can skirt the rules.
But the real problem,
you get caught. Like,
you get caught.
That's how it goes.
But the real problem I see with this, if I have to really narrow it down, is, legacies aren't going away, but what we need to address is that there's limited opportunities. Education used to be more accessible. Education used to be more affordable. It's becoming less so day in and day out, and it's something that has to be addressed. And this is a microcosm that shows an example of how out of whack we really are. That's what I think. That's just my perspective.
Probably small potatoes, though. This particular instance, this practice in general.
The practice, I'm saying, this is an example of the practice.
Practice has always been going on. This isn't a new practice. This isn't like, oh, now we're doing this. Now this is happening. It may have been worse in the past. So from the standpoint, again, from a societal standpoint, I think it's wrong. I think it's bad. We have to stop the cheaters, period. Like, we can't let people just cheat with impunity. But at the same time, the impulse is always going to be there. When you do very well, you're not trying to just swim in your money like Scrooge McDuck. You're trying to use that thing to make your life and your family's life better. And if that's how these people think they can make their kids' life better, that's what they're going to do. And hey, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe the kids end up in a worse place because you didn't teach them things like responsibility and consequence and overcoming.
They're going to be paying for them for the rest of their life. They're going to just be paying for them.
We see people in business. We see people in government right now that had the silver spoon their whole life and that were always shielded from failure.
Which I think is causing major problems. I agree. Like, I mean, you're kind of proving my point.
Let's touch on that, because I think that might be why this story resonates right now. Like, maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, it might have not have been as big of a deal, but I think you're right. And I'm definitely, we're not going to take it here to talk about necessarily the administration directly, but if we look at just two people in the administration kind of ether, who I would say are someone like Jared and Ivanka, I'm not here to knock them because I don't know them and I don't know what their smarts or not are, but we know that for the role that they seem to be playing, especially Jared Kushner as kind of the Middle East envoy and almost like an ambassador, I'm not sure, as a 36-year-old guy going in the White House with zero experience except for his family's real estate business, if that was enough experience to qualify him to be negotiating with Saudi Arabia, China, all these different countries.
I'm going to go ahead and say no.
And no, but that's my point. So I think that we're between that, kind of the Me Too stuff, all this stuff going on, I think this is just another example of the culture identifying that there's a different lane for certain people of wealth that the rest of us aren't really in that lane. And it's interesting, before we got on this podcast, I was watching the news about the Paul Manafort sentencing today. And what they had talked about was the prison for which his lawyers had asked him to go to. And again, I got no problem with kind of any of this stuff in general, but it was just interesting to hear it, that the prison was the same prison that Jack Abramoff and some guy that Clinton pardoned, and kind of like the wealth prison Club Fed type of thing, where there's no barbed wire, no fences. The families get to stay in housing nearby, which I guess is paid by the taxpayer, which is interesting. Their commissary includes French vanilla latte choices, racquetballs, all that kind of stuff. They have to wear a green uniform from Monday to Friday, but on weekends they wear what they want.
Privilege is nice when you get it.
I think your point is well made, though.
But that's my point. The only thing that they have to deal with is a 6 a.m. wake up and a 4 p.m. check-in. That's it. And I thought to myself, but these guys were convicted of crimes. So is that fair?
But there was white collar crimes. Remember, we treat white collar crimes different from street crimes as if.
No, but Rob, I know guys that did white collar crimes that went to regular prisons and they didn't get that. I'm talking about guys that got fined by the SEC, that got found guilty of embezzling money, just regular white collar crimes, but they didn't get that option. They still went to a state or federal penitentiary. These guys, because they have the option, because of, I guess, the ability to hire the right legal teams, they get a different type of prison system. So I think that's kind of what's coming out now is there's this second lane for certain people. And it's not even just wealthy. It's just this difference between like wealthy and connected.
Right. And I actually want to wrap up your point, Tunde. It's a great point. I actually think this is why people love ALC and are starting to think about socialism. It's also why Trumpism is there. People are frustrated about how the system is working. And James, you might be right that people know that there's privilege out there, but they feel it more than they ever have and feel like the privileged are becoming more privileged, and those who don't have means, it's harder for them to be able to succeed and actually achieve that American dream that we were all told was possible.
Let me just put a disclaimer. I'm not with AOC. I'm with the Carlton.
And Rob, and what I keep on hearing, and we brought this up before, what I'm hearing is that people are complacent and don't want to work anymore. So check this out. If you see that there's if there's a great amount of benefits over here with these people you're talking about, they get to pay for their kids to go to school. They get better treatment even when they go to prison. They get nicer cars, nicer food. Why aren't people thinking like, hey, I like that. Like, that looks good to me. How did those people get there? And maybe I should work hard or try, put myself out of my comfort zone and challenge myself to get on that side of the fence. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily Paul Manafort.
I'm about to say, there's a lot of the Paul Manaforts in the world, though, that cheated their way there. So that's important. I mean,
okay, look,
they're cheating their way there.
But let me just say that we're talking about the benefits of having wealth,
privilege and wealth
that come with it. So why aren't people, including this AOC woman and all her little fans, saying, maybe I should work a little harder and bust my ass and figure out how to get over here and not be like everybody else did in history, whoever got from there to here, especially in the United States of America, where that is a true opportunity.
I think that's a very naive point of view. Like, so you're saying that the way capitalists get ahead is on the backs of other people, on the backs of labor. So you're saying they should start exploiting people so that they can really get ahead. They should start taking advantage of people so that they can get ahead. We're reading about Wells Fargo and all the stuff they were doing. Hey, they did very well but they were defrauding people. Is that what people should be doing? People want to work an honest living and be remunerated in a fair way.
Exactly.
And that's
we're talking about. I agree.
That's what the Square deal was about. The Square deal was about that. The New Deal was about that. And this Green New Deal, I don't know if they're borrowing the words, but it's about people want to work an honest job and get treated fairly. That's what's not happening. That's what you end up creating.
I mean, what I think people want to clock in and clock out and go home, if that's what you mean by honest living. What I'm seeing is mass complacency, mass laziness, a lack of drive. So, no, I'm not telling people to go out and do anything corrupt. What I'm telling you is go out and start a car wash business. Go out and start a landscaping business.
Right.
Go out and start whatever and bust your ass, Well,
I think Americans work very hard, Carlton, though. But few things, only a few people can own the business. If everybody was the owner, there'd be no workers, one. Two, productivity is actually at an all-time high. But what's not is actually the value that labor is getting back. So I think people are seeing this collectively. Lots of people are working very hard. Yes, there are some people that are exploiting
harder than they ever have. That's what productivity means. People are working harder than they ever have.
And that's a fact. People are.
Those are numbers. Those are numbers. Those are numbers.
And they're not getting the same return.
When they're underwear are working harder than people ever have before. All these remote workers.
They're more productive.
Yeah, they're more productive.
They produce more.
And they get less wage because.
I think we're talking two different things, though, because I agree with you, Carlton, on just the general idea of people being complacent and people needing to work hard. But I think that's just been throughout history, right?
Exactly.
It's like the 80-20 rule. You've got 20% of the people probably producing 80% of the output. But I think just this particular topic that we started on with this college thing, and maybe like the Manafort, specifically the prison choices he's getting as another example, is that it's like beyond just regular people with wealth that have done well for themselves and their ability to use that wealth to maybe leverage some benefits. Because
there's nothing wrong with
do that myself personally in different ways, so I can't be a hypocrite and say that's wrong. But I think that the difference between these type of things is that it's almost like a grift or a cronyism way of doing it. Like, that's what I mean. Like, when I realized, or maybe it's just because what I do for a profession, when I realized that these guys were in this college thing were engaged in kind of tax fraud, that's when I was like, all right, this is, like you said, Rob, this is just sloppy. Like, what happened to just writing a check for $200,000 to the medical school of the university and just saying, hey,
they wanted to skip those steps because they got
people are just madder about this now. Like that is real.
People are madder. I agree.
We had a president that was elected 19 years ago that people said this same kind of stuff about, as far as, he really didn't qualify to go to the schools that he went to or to do the things that he did. But people weren't that upset about it. People are more upset because they're making less for the same amount of work or for more work. And honestly, Carlton, I think Tunde, you guys are both right. People have always been in this mentality. The mass will never be the entrepreneurial. The entrepreneurial is going to be more of the exception. But you built the greatest middle class in the history of the world, even with that, because you gave workers a fair deal. And now workers don't get a fair deal. You're saying, hey, I want all of you guys to be exceptional in order to get average return. And that's the structural problem. People feel that. The people on the left and the people on the right are mad about the same thing.
Yep. They just don't know it. They haven't come to that realization. We got to get ready to wrap up. That's a really good way to wrap it up. All I'll say is that this is showing that the system's not working. I believe capitalism can work, but only when we create more value than we seek to capture. And that only works when the government is working on behalf of the people, not just the few. I'm Rob Richardson. Thank you so much for joining us on Disruption Now. We'll see you next time.